All right, Mountaineer Nation, thanks for tuning in to this special edition of Fox on West Virginia Mountaineer Sports. And I'm calling it special because it's really athletics adjacent. I tend to do this from time to time as it seems like the evolution of college athletics has flipped over into an entire world since the year 2020. It seems as like to comment on these things, you have to be half a sports analyst and half a legal consultant in some form or fashion. And you know what? Maybe even call it like cut it into thirds, a sports economist, to have like a rational, logical, or creative opinion on college athletics these days. So I'm kind of going to dive in there, I feel like, between the legal and the economics, and I hope you find this interesting because it is a little bit of a slow period of time. We're done with football. I mean, we could always talk about roster management in the offseason, but I'm kind of like a little bit moved on. We'll talk about that more as we get closer to spring practice and beyond. Basketball team had a great win on Tuesday, and I say great because it was just like, phew, needed that one. You couldn't lose that game to Kansas State. Big matchup tomorrow against Baylor at home. Baseball, I will be talking about within the next week or so. I will say, we're now 2 weeks away from the start of the baseball regular season. Yeah, I can't believe it, mid-February, but that's when our baseball team kicks off the season down south, so I will be talking about a preview for that. But for now, please like this video so more Mountaineer fans can see it across YouTube, and would love to have you a subscriber to my channel if you're a West Virginia football, basketball, baseball fan, or just really care about WVU Athletics in general. So thanks for tuning in for this. So I gotta, this is wild to me. And I think if you're someone who's probably, teenage years or in your early 20s, you don't care about this so much. But as someone who is a homeowner, taxpayer, has a family, kids, you have more responsibilities when you enter that stage of life, and you look at your finances and everything that you're supporting more critically. Well, I stumble upon this article this week, and oh my goodness gracious, I cannot believe that we have reached this point in American society as it pertains to being a college sports fan or the athletic departments themselves. So Gene Taylor, the athletic director at Kansas State University, who's in kind of I would say is probably on the hottest hot seat of any athletic director in the nation right now for the way that the basketball season is going with head coach Jerome Tang, with how the football season went kind of mediocrely, and then also not so quietly really, but Kansas State moved on from their head football coach and going over to Colin Klein as their new head coach. I was missing it. I was like, wait a second, I want to say this right. Chris Kleiman retired because he wanted to step out of this arena, and then Kansas State just so happened to stumble upon Colin Klein, their near Heisman Trophy winning quarterback from 2012, who was the offensive coordinator at Texas A&M. So the headline reads for this: Kansas schools to ask state for help with athletics and NIL era. So I'm just going to read a few excerpts from this article from the Mercury out in the state of Kansas. So Taylor and his colleagues, both from Kansas and Wichita State, so the three if you want to call it FBS or Power 5 if you include Wichita State for basketball or just Division I in general, plan to ask the state government for help in an era where colleges are obligated to come up with millions to pay athletes. So quote in this article from Taylor, athletics bring a lot of economic value to this state, but the burden of having to pay athletes $20 million a year, escalating to $30 million over the next decade, means that K-State and the other two would be able to be more competitive with state help of some kind. You don't want to see us not be successful, because then your tax dollars are going to go down if our football and our basketball aren't continuing to win, and these stadiums aren't going to be filled, and the dollars that flow into our state and our communities are going to go down, he said. And guess what? More and more states are funding NIL or funding the rev share dollars. Now, I don't know about that. I'd have to do a little bit more research on this, and so I just went as a West Virginia fan and asked my good friend over at perplexity.com if West Virginia athletics was funding, if the state legislature was funding WVU Athletics, which pointed me to WVU's athletics budget for last school year, and that comes up as a $0 line item. So I think this is something that athletic director Gene Taylor is kind of speculating on, which is, happening, I feel like, all across the country, of the dark webs of which the dollars and cents flow and whose hand they're coming in, as I've talked about on a previous video. That's something I feel like really pissed me off at the beginning of January when the transfer portal opened, is how, and this is, this was then critiqued by coaches and I don't know if it was athletic directors around the country, is they're just moving different pots of money from in and out of their athletic departments, which is now having in-house collective, to put money under shell companies to pay above the cap NIL dollars for the schools who can afford it, while taking in as many tax-deductible donations from donors, big boosters, to fund up to the $20.5 million house settlement rev share. So I know it gets complicated, and this goes over the head. So let me simplify it for people like myself, and just kind of disgust and skepticism that brought out of me here reading this article. So what Taylor is asking for is for tax dollars from citizens who live in the state of Kansas, their tax dollars to be allocated back to the universities so that then they can pay players to go there. So I live up, just as I've mentioned many times before, just above the border here in southwestern Pennsylvania. I'm not a Penn State or Pitt fan, and I don't know how that would work because Pitt is a private school. They're not, but Penn State. So if the same kind of thing that Taylor is advocating from the state legislature in Kansas happened here in Pennsylvania, my tax dollars would be used to fund Penn State's athletic department to pay their players. As a West Virginia fan, I would be absolutely freaking livid. Absolutely livid. And imagine anyone who lives in the state of Kansas who isn't a fan of Kansas State, Kansas, or Wichita State. So here's what I will say. As I've learned more about this, as it relates to the pro game, and I think this kind of got in the national news most recently with the Kansas City Chiefs looking to move over into Kansas City, Kansas from Kansas City, Missouri, is that, everyday people like you and me, depending upon where you live, so in the city of Pittsburgh, nearest me, people like their tax dollars go toward building the stadiums that the teams then play for. And I understand the rationale. I don't agree with it, but I can understand is if you build it, they will come to games, they will spend money at the restaurants nearby hotels. If you've been to the north side of Pittsburgh, you can understand how that's built up over the course of the last 30, 40 years with PNC Park and Acrisure Stadium, formerly Heinz Field, being in there. It's an entire economic driver. And in the case of West Virginia, it's always been said that on Saturdays in the fall, Morgantown, West Virginia becomes the largest city in the state of West Virginia, overtaking Charleston just by the sheer number of people who come from all over the country to attend Mountaineer games at Milan Puskar Stadium, and that's fantastic. And I totally understand how a college town is only a college town because of the money that's driven through what his argument is, how many cities across the country, if they didn't have highly competitive sports teams, would their town be able to survive by the different stores, restaurants, pretty much all business activity flows around the different sporting events. And this is what just aggravates me, or maybe that's not the right word, but it's like just seeing through between the lines of now the economic model that is set up at Division I institutions. And I mean, it's like, if you're an older fan and you've realized this many, many years ago, like, kudos to you, but I want to talk about it at least for its show, because I still think it's like been a relatively or newer evolution, I would think, at least since probably the 80s, is that these schools using the marketing power of athletics to drive your enrollments higher, to not only, fund your institution, fund your supporting, the town in which you live, city, wherever, but then also create graduates who live in the town, surrounding areas, state, etc. I see where Taylor is coming from in the aspects of that it's all one machine. But I just don't agree with it now to the point of if you're going to go the route of paying players. Now, I get it. It's all coming from one pot. So however way you skin the cat, siphon the money one way more toward players. I just don't think that we should, as a society, be funding, state taxes that then flow the money back down to the schools to then pay the players to go there. Buildings, upkeep, renovations, I can understand that. Like in the example that I talked about with building Acrisure Stadium in Pittsburgh or PNC Park for the Pirates. For me, even still, taking a more than recent example, Jim Justice, former Governor Jim Justice, using $10 million of CARES Act money to fund Marshall's baseball stadium. As a West Virginia fan who does not care for Marshall and, the little brother syndrome that they project back on West Virginia, I mean, that was during a really fraught time for West Virginia sports between football and basketball. And, $10 million is going to go down to Marshall with that money. I mean, what could West Virginia have done with $10 million? That would be great, great for West Virginia to have. But instead, Justice sent that money that way. And I know that was a very controversial thing. So right now, we're not at that point. But I can just say is if Taylor and others get their way, yes, this will happen more in more places across the country. And I don't like it. And I think more, fans should be informed about this. So I guess now that falls to what is the bigger question, in that whose responsibility really is it to be able to fund the activity of an athletics enterprise at a Division I sports? I think this is a golden question that has been trying to resolve itself out for the last really 6 years since NIL has become legal and everything, I guess so it's really 5 as of this upcoming July. And now everything's happened with the House settlement, having a rev share, which is, kind of just, I feel like a bit of a farce because there's no really enforcement against the cap, at least publicly as of yet from the College Sports Commission, not going against some of these bad acting schools that still tamper, that are definitely going above the cap, that are paying players. In the case of Oregon, Dante Moore, their starting quarterback, $7.5 million reportedly for this upcoming season. It's just chaos. And I hate to use that word continuously in all my videos and not unpack that. So really, unfortunately, this is the way that I feel like in the year of our Lord 2026 is what it comes down to, is that the on-paper sustained success of West Virginia, specifically's rosters, falls on us, the fans. Driving those 501c3 tax-deductible donations to the Mountaineer Athletic Club, and where if Athletic Director Ren Baker was listening, or any of the power players at WVU, I think if there was one thing that maybe they could do a little bit better of, because, talking about on one of my more recent videos of how over this past summer, Ren Baker said during the Three Guys Before the Game podcast with Tony Caridi and those guys, saying that he would consider or look into a model similarly to like the Green Bay Packers have, with stakes of ownership into WVU Athletics. Well, we kind of already have that, as I've unpacked that, in what West Virginia does with the Mountaineer Athletic Club. Now, could I think that, I think the messaging surrounding the incentives, because we live in such a what are you going to do for me kind of society. So the different levels, more, better communicating those different levels that you could support. I think West Virginia was doing a bit of this whenever Ren Baker first started here, and everything was kind of evolving between Country Roads Trust and the athletic department. Instead of getting, as the previous athletic director, Shane Lyons, was saying, really an arm's length partnership with Country Roads Trust, more coming seamlessly together. And now West Virginia has this Gold Blue Enterprises, which is intertwined with athletics. But I think that's what us as Mountaineer fans need. We need continuous communication and repetition. And though it may seem old, but it's like if we as West Virginia fans could all spend X, and here's what you're going to get out of it, A, B, C, and D for an entire year, that goes beyond just, win one for the Gipper, supporting the boys in old, gold, and blue, but really what tangibly do you get from that you could then make that more of a case. Now, I think West Virginia does a tremendous job of that too. Continual donors, season ticket holders, but I think that's tapping into others across the country, because there are more than just Mountaineer fans that I recognize here in the state of West Virginia in the contiguous states. And then, of course, what it also is going to fall on top of are the big money boosters. So the guys like who are more of the public, higher profile guys like Ken Kendrick and Pat McAfee. And I hate that that's what it has to turn into, because it's almost like in the case of Cody Campbell at Texas or Phil Knight out at Oregon. Trying to think of him, Larry Ellison with Michigan last year, and Bryce Underwood, through Dave Portnoy at Barstool Sports. Like, some of these guys try and play rogue owners, or like Mark Cuban making the largest donation he's ever made just recently for Indiana Athletics because of the success that they had in the college football playoff, and specifically this college football season. He's made a large donation, the largest one he's ever made, and really galvanizing that alumni base. I hate that it falls on that. Us as fans, big money boosters, all collectively. It's almost like, would you, the power of many, in our case in the state of West Virginia, of having so many dedicated West Virginia fans out there that's dwarfs some others, but then you have, smaller maybe alumni bases, or, sometimes it's one in the same, bigger alumni bases, more influential, richer ones. I hate that it becomes more like the rich and powerful run the whole enterprise across the country, but unfortunately the way that is. And then the third piece really being increased student fees. And I also don't think that that's fair. I think at the University of Tennessee having like a competition, athletic competition fee, so that all of their undergraduates have to now pay into the athletic department so that they can have better players, that translates into a better viewing product. Again, it's all one and the same. So if you want a better athletic student experience, you have to buy better players, which then relates to wins, and everybody goes home happy, and you feel like you're getting what you've paid for. So I hate that this is what it's come to in the business ROI of sports fans. And I really think it's on us. It's all of these people, all of these different constituencies, if you want to call it that, can relate. And what could ease the pressure of that is really two things. That wouldn't, again, as I talked about a couple of years ago, how expensive the West Virginia game day experience is for fans like us. That I think two things would really help West Virginia, and unfortunately that we just have to continue to be patient. It's unfortunate that West Virginia can't be a school that swings a big stick like an Ohio State, like a Texas, or name your other blue blood across the country who can dictate terms, and really is bigger than the conference that they're representing themselves. But that's unfortunately the case, that West Virginia just has to kind of wait and see and make their move whenever it's most advantageous and appropriate, because I think two things would really help for West Virginia's cases. And still, West Virginia, I looked at their revenues versus expenses for last academic year, 24-25, and West Virginia, based upon that document, which I was able to find, showed around a $12.4 million surplus. So revenues over expenses. It's not like West Virginia's Rutgers, who lost $78 million last year and are now $500 million worth in debt. And I think that's going to be something. Sorry, I'm kind of fighting a cold, so bear with me. As we look toward the realignment to end all realignment in fewer than 5 years, and this is when I think this is coming, that schools like that are that much in debt, that can't continually sustain this, that their university says no, that will fall down and be relegated, rather than continuing to stay up in the two top premier conferences out there. Something that I don't think that many people out in the sports media world are talking about, because it's not sexy and not a lot of that information is public and aggregated anywhere. But to know where athletic departments across the country, departments' revenues are talking about, or valuations by national newspapers and stuff like that. And I remember talking about that last summer, that West Virginia wasn't really rated all that high. I think it was either the Wall Street Journal or another publication right there. So that's not something that's necessarily talked about, whether schools are in the black or in the red. But anytime you're in the red, especially for multiple years and hundreds of millions of dollars potentially in debt, that's not a good thing, unless your university has huge endowment. And I know how that works with endowments and being able to draw upon. So that's on the university to be able to do it. But two things, come back to that instead of going off of my side tangent, that would really help West Virginia, I feel like, tremendously, is being in a more geographically advantageous conference that cuts down on travel cost. As I said back in the fall, when I went to the West Virginia Arizona State game, it is just really mind-boggling, put it lightly, not say go with an A word that I wanted to use, in that a team in Tempe, Arizona, is in the same conference as a team in Morgantown, West Virginia. It's ludicrous. Or Tucson, or Provo, Utah, or Boulder, Colorado. That should not be the case. That we need to get back to, for many different reasons, more of a geographically contiguous conference, rather than having what we have now, and that's just been weird. And also being in a conference with a better TV deal. Now, I mean, Big 12 conference commissioner Brett Yormark cut the deal that absolutely saved the Big 12 a few years ago, being first to the table in imploding and forcing to rebuild the Pac-12 conference. So getting first to the table to ESPN and Fox Sports to rebuild that Big 12 media rights deal, again, destabilized the Pac-12, it fell apart, and West Virginia, or the Big 12, was able to gobble those Mountain West schools and really save it, alongside with what it added from the American Conference and an independent in BYU the year prior. So the Big 12, at least from that perspective, really saved itself. But is it the best deal? No, it's not the best deal. It's definitely the fourth of the Power Four conferences when TV rights deals, and the Big 12 or the Big 10 and the SEC, as we know, are nearly double what the Big 12 and what the ACC is having as well. So I think, and this is what takes, brandy and cigars and jovial banter between Brett Yormark and the TV network CEOs. But I think, I really do, after this past college football playoff selection, I feel as if what the Big 12 is going to go into a full partnership deal. Again, if dramatic realignment to end all realignment happens and the Big 12 really survives, I really wonder if the Big 12 is working behind the scenes with TNT to form an exclusive media rights deal, to go in particularly, I don't know if they're going to negotiate it separately, but since Brett Yormark was named conference commissioner, he's always talked about selling the media rights to football separate from basketball. And though West Virginia hasn't had a lot of games, it seems like, on TNT, this season. They did more so in football. And I got to say, I thought that the television production crews for those football games did a tremendous job. I like listening to Mike Golick Jr. a whole lot better than I like listening to the announcers on ESPN Plus, for example. Nick Farrell excluded, good, a friend from Waynesburg University, though he and I graduated together, or in the same program there at Waynesburg. But I would just say that I think that ESPN burned a bridge with the Big 12, and this is just me observing as a fan, when they excluded BYU this past year. I understand that BYU, didn't do itself any favors in the way that it really fell flat on its face in the regular season against Texas Tech, but then also in the Big 12 championship game. But to have an 11-1 resume going into a Big 12 championship game and then not being selected to the college football playoff over a team that didn't even compete in its own conference championship game in Miami, it doesn't make sense to me, with a worse record at 10-2. So ESPN did BYU no favors. This also comes after a season ago when the Big 12 only got Arizona State into the college football playoff. So right now, in the eyes of Brett Yormark, and I feel like others in leadership positions within the Big 12 is not viewed upon favorably by that network, which controls the rights to the college football playoff. So as time goes by, and now we have no changes to the college football playoff for 2026. So this is going to happen once again. Time goes by. Brett Yormark, I'm sure, is going to have more of conversations, get closer, in tighter with TNT, and that's the way that it's going to go. Is if it's going to, this conference is going to split away from its media rights deal with ESPN and Fox. So then the Fox would control, it kind of leaves out some other players, like what about CBS? What about NBC? Carson, you're leaving out a whole, could West Virginia potentially have Thursday night games, or choose another Friday night game, similarly like the Big Ten does, and put those games maybe on Amazon Prime? I don't know. I think that the next wave of college football realignment is going to be fascinating, and every time I try to on paper kind of put together how I can see this next iteration, whether it's just 48 teams, 30 teams, 60 teams, I really can't do it. It's really hard. I've been trying for about a year to try and figure out this problem. So I know this kind of comes like I've gone on, feels like a way off on a rambling tangent, but just know that there are things happening beyond outside of the parameters of just what happens between the white lines or on the court with these athletic directors, university presidents, state legislatures that are trying to figure out this whole way that college sports at the highest level is going. And a school like Kansas State is going so far that asking the state legislature that, hey, we need tax-paying citizens to now pay for players to be able to come here and compete for us. That is how bonkers of we went from no Johnny Manziel, you can't make money off of all of the Texas A&M jerseys that you're, that fans are buying with your name and your last name and number, or even just in that case, number at the fan store in College Station. No Todd Gurley, you can't go to an alumni event and make money off trading cards that you sign, or just name your Shabazz Napier. It's a recruiting violation, or it's an NCAA violation if your coach on a recruiting visit buys you a hamburger. Or I think that happened with Jim Harbaugh at Michigan in COVID in 2020. It's just like the pendulum swung so far this way that the NCAA had so much control over student athlete behavior, being on campus as a high school recruit and through their entire time, to now it's gone so far that, hey, leadership at universities are now needing tax dollars from the people who live in their state to be able to contribute to it. And if it happens in Kansas, I feel like that conversation will only heat up here in the state of West Virginia, because West Virginia is kind of privileged in that it is the biggest game in town. It is the only Power 4 institution in an entire state. Some states like Texas, for example, it'd be a lot harder to do something like that because you got Texas A&M. I know Baylor, TCU are private schools, but Texas Tech, or in the state of Florida, you got a private school in Miami, Florida State. It gets a little, you have to cut the pie a whole lot more ways, whereas West Virginia is only the show in town. So that's why I felt as if it was relevant to even bring it up, given what happened a few years ago with Marshall and their baseball stadium, given what's going on with Kansas now, and I feel like Kansas to West Virginia being in the same conference, it's worth talking about all this because it's just crazy right now. So I'd love to know your thoughts, good, bad, or indifferent. Do you think with me, like, this may be coming? No, Carson, this would never be possible. I couldn't believe it. Do you think that would be a sticking point with some, citizens of their state, with their, governors, state reps, state senators, so on and so forth? What are your thoughts? Do you think it's ludicrous like me? I can't believe that we're talking about it. So anyway, please like this video so more Mountaineer fans can see it across YouTube. Love to have you a subscriber to my channel. Tell your friends, tell your dog, tell your friends, tell your family, tell your dog that I do this each and every week and have a lot of fun doing it. And I'll be back soon to talk more West Virginia athletics, basketball, baseball definitely comes soon. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. Hail West Virginia. Let's go.